After testing out the DJI G5 and the Movi M15, I decided to go with the Ronin-M. And the reason being is that these gimbals, the brushless gimbals, give you a significant benefit over traditional glide cam type stabilizers that are just using weights and they don't have any motors. However, the advantages that they give you aren't always justified by the extreme cost. And the Ronin-M is a much more attractive price point, being quite a bit cheaper than the Movi and the DJI offerings. Now, the Ronin will fly a smaller amount of weight, so most of the time we're shooting on the GH4, and that's why I decided to get the Ronin-M, because the Ronin-M can fly a GH4. If you got a bigger camera, you'd probably want to get something a little bit beefier. And the other option you can always take into consideration is renting something. You know, if there is a project where we're shooting on a bigger camera, we can always rent a higher end gimbal without having to buy one outright for like $10,000. The Ronin-M is much more affordable at around $1,400 currently. And so I decided to do this unboxing video. It's essentially just me doing exactly that, unboxing and kind of going through everything. So I kind of tossed the manuals aside. That's because I figured I'd just give it a go and see if I could figure out how to put this thing together. And you know what? Thankfully, it's pretty stinking easy. There's not much to it. Everything kind of fits where it's supposed to. It's laid out by common sense. So you can kind of figure out what goes where pretty easily. There are a lot of pieces in the packaging, but it's nice because there's a lot of stuff to go through and it feels really, really nice. DJI did a really good job putting this thing together and it feels high quality. That's the first thing you'll notice, is that it feels like it's solid, it's built well. Now these gimbals are very, I don't want to say fragile, but because of the flexibility and the mobility you get with a gimbal that's stabilized like this, you really got to be careful that you don't put too much torque on it, because you could easily snap it or break it or throw it out of whack if you push it too far in the wrong direction. So you still have to be gentle and careful with them because they are somewhat delicate. And that's by the very nature of what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be isolated from all other movement, so they have to be very fluid and very flexible. You do get some tools, and unfortunately, the mounting plate, or the way you mount a camera, the mounting screws that they give you are all Allen wrench or hex wrench type mounting points, unlike the traditional flathead that you'd normally have, which is much more easy to handle because you can just get a quarter or a key or a screwdriver and pop it in there, compared to having a specific tool. So I didn't really like to see that, but everything else was looking really good. All the handles seem really nicely assembled. You know, they got the carbon fiber type thing. It is very light. The whole setup doesn't feel like it hardly anything, especially compared to the Movi and the DJI that we tested out. Obviously, those are meant for bigger cameras, so they do way more. But the Ronin-M is really nice and very lightweight. And all the stuff kind of just tightens down with those kind of thumb screws. So you can do everything toolless. You don't need specific tools to put it together, other than, like I said, that the screw to mount a camera. You do need a special tool for that, but everything else you can do as is with the toolless adjustments on there. The battery pack, it comes with one battery pack and it charges with this kind of strange adapter. I'm not, probably fairly standard for gimbals, something like this, and other aerial stuff, but it's not anything you likely have. It's a kind of foreign camera, a foreign adapter type thing. You wouldn't necessarily plug it into anything else. So it's just for the gimbal, and it all pieces together really nice. And thankfully DJI includes a stand so you can balance the thing on its own without having to have someone else hold it or figure out how to rig it to a C-stand or something like that. So you do get a nice little stand to do all the balancing, which is very helpful. Here's those tools again, going through, kind of picking out. I need to get those screws. And like I said, these, you could swap it out for something that's a little bit more traditional that uses a flathead, but they give you so many of these, and I wish they weren't the stupid Allen wrench, hex wrench style. It's just such a engineer type thing rather than actual practical use. I've talked to some engineer buddies, and they, you know, that's kind of their go-to because that's what they use all the time. But for people like me who are out in the field, and sometimes you don't always have a hex wrench right with you, you need like to be able to use whatever's on you, and it's a little bit more challenging to get those things secured. Now, one issue I did run into with the GH4 specifically, when you try and mount it directly with that center plate centered on the gimbal, the GH4 doesn't actually fit, and you are supposed to mount it the way I was doing it initially, in reverse, because that plate on the bottom has a specific end where you can add a little lens mount. I took it off because it didn't fit with this lens combination. But so see right there, you got the screws out in front. So that's the front of the plate, and you're supposed to slide it on backwards, but you can see that the handle on the GH4 is hitting the side of the gimbal itself. So you have to move that center plate adjustment. You got to slide it over so you can actually get the camera on there. But then the other problem becomes the actual tightening pin is on that other side, and it's actually fairly long. So you really have to kind of find a nice balance, and you can do it with the GH4, but it barely kind of fits right in the center there. And once you do that, you can get it dialed in, get it all balanced, and it took about 30 minutes the first time. There's some tricks you can kind of do in terms of just like letting it hang one way or another and then kind of tuning in that one axis. But it's really important that you get these things balanced, because if you don't, you're putting more stress on the motors and you're not going to get good performance. Right here, I wasn't following the directions. I was trying to get it connected to the remote control, but you have to connect it to the app first, and you have to be very specific with the order that you set stuff in. You actually need to pair the remote to the gimbal before it'll work. But now here you can see some test footage. This is after unboxing it, spending 30 minutes balancing it and then just taking it right outside. Looks pretty freaking good, and how if we could obviously try and dial it in and get it even better, but for spending all said maybe an hour total getting it up and running and getting this quality footage, having a little fun there running, it's remarkably good, and I was very impressed with the performance. I've seen a lot of people online in the reviews, some people complaining about that it's hard to balance or that it doesn't perform very well, and frankly, I feel like those people are doing something wrong, because if you follow the steps, you set it up right, you get it balanced, and that's the key. You got to balance the camera first without the motors at all. If you get it perfectly balanced to where if you position the camera any one direction, it'll stay that direction, and you can look up tutorials on how to balance it. There's plenty of videos out there. If you get it balanced, then the motors, all they're doing is correcting for the stabilization issues, the shake, the vibration, the panning and tilting, all the stuff that you're trying to correct for. And they don't have to compensate for you being off balance a particular direction. In the manual, it even says, if your motors are over a certain threshold, you need to rebalance your camera. So hopefully we did a good job getting it all balanced in. The app actually works really well. I use my iPhone to kind of get it all dialed in, and there's some additional adjustments you can make in there, and it connects right up with the gimbal itself over Bluetooth, and it works really, really well. So I'm super happy with the DJI Ronin-M. Again, it's for lighter weight cameras, so if you got a bigger camera, you probably have to look at some other options out there. But for what it is, the price point and what it can fly, it's spectacular.